I'm going to read Myrian's Journal 3 now. Myrian's Journal 3, Part 1, Chapter 1. Sentinel had no problems with showing her engagement ring to Paisley and Dalton when they came to Myrian's graduation party, but Samaria was a different matter. When the time came for Seth to go home that night, he was well aware of Sentinel's unease and told her that Samaria would find out eventually, but she shouldn't make herself tell her aunt before she felt ready. 2. It helps me sometimes to write and read what I'm nervous about out loud to myself and imagine it's what someone else is telling me. Then I'll either rewrite and reread it until I feel good enough about it to say it out loud, or I'll ask Craper's advice. Sentinel laughed. Seth looked at her confused. She explained, I'm laughing because I predicted you would tell me that, in the end, about asking Craper's advice. I hope that doesn't hurt you. This time Seth laughed, kissing her. Why would it hurt me at all? They said their goodnights, and Sentinel took Seth's advice immediately. She wrote and revised, read to herself, revised, until she was absolutely satisfied with what she'd written. However, 2 months had elapsed already, and it was midsummer by the time she was ready to tell Samaria. Surprisingly, it was Samaria who started. Sentinel, it's time I told you something. I've been keeping a secret for a while, not knowing how Myrian would feel about it, or you, but I'm ready to tell you both. However, if you have any suggestions as to how I can break the news to Myrian, please let me know. Sentinel blinked first, smiling. She nodded slowly. Okay, so I have something I need to tell you, but if you want to go first... Samaria sighed in a nervous way, unlike herself. I've been seeing someone. Sentinel laughed, then covered her mouth. She hugged Samaria suddenly. I always hoped this day would come. I mean, not to offend you or anything. I just always felt like, why can't my awesome aunt meet someone and not be alone? Wait, not that raising us meant you were alone. I'm so happy to hear that. As she broke from the hug slowly, Samaria's hair got caught in Sentinel's engagement ring. Sentinel's eyes widened as she carefully untangled Samaria's hair from it. Samaria reached for her hand cautiously. May I? Sentinel smiled, bit her lip, nodding. Samaria took her hand and gazed at Sentinel's hand for about a few minutes, speechless, but the tears sprung into her eyes, which said it all. I thought I'd been imagining it. Samaria took a breath. I'm so proud of you. You and Seth, I've dreamed this for you. Sentinel laughed, relieved it was going so well, and then she remembered one of the most crucial parts of the discussion she needed to bring up. It was now or never. Samaria, I don't know how to say this. Samaria half laughed, half scoffed good-naturedly. There's nothing you can't say, Sentinel. Okay, well, I feel like there needs to be a change in my living conditions. For Myrian's sake, and I honor the integrity of your home, and I wish to preserve that. I don't wish to be a bad influence on Myrian. You couldn't be less than a positive influence on Myrian if you tried, but I see what you're getting at, and if you need to be on your own in the meantime, I support your decision. Sentinel hugged Samaria again, and laughing, she said, Thank you, Aunt Velvefin, knowing that as Samaria laughed in response, she was rolling her eyes. Myrian had been on her way back from the kitchen with a fresh mug of apple cider when she'd heard. There's nothing you can't say, Sentinel. She wasn't intending to listen any further, as she'd continued on her way to her room, but when Sentinel responded, Okay, well, I feel like there needs to be a change in my living conditions for Myrian's sake. Myrian abruptly stopped, thinking, how could she possibly arrive at that conclusion for my sake? She should move out. Sentinel's voice continued, and I honor the integrity of your home, and I wish to preserve that. I don't wish to be a bad influence on Myrian. Myrian's chest tightened, and she quickened her pace to her room before Sentinel could catch her. While there were so many questions Myrian wanted to ask Sentinel, given that tiny bit of information, there were just too many questions at once on her mind. Myrian sat on her bed with the apple cider, sipping it slowly, and attempted to make sense of what she'd heard in silence. She recalled a memory from over a little year before. when she'd gone to Citadel's room wanting to talk to her and Seth was there. He'd quickly told her that she hadn't invited him overnight. But Myrian thought about the beach trip, how Citadel hadn't really seemed to notice how long she and Creeper had been gone when they took turns standing under the shower water at the beach, or how neither Seth nor Citadel seemed to notice when she and Creeper were at the cafe together, although Myrian had asked Creeper if he could tell them, with the assumption that they would be worried after so much time of them away. Obviously, Citadel and Seth were closer than ever, even leading up to Seth's proposing. However, Myrian didn't look too deeply into why until the implications of Citadel's words hit her. All of a sudden, Myrian remembered how Seth had said he'd need to come back at one point from working at the Canvasine factory because it was difficult for him. Or was it? Creeper had just returned after many months of absence and Seth was meant to take his place, but then Myrian blinked back tears, looking down into her mug, now empty. She took a breath, put the mug aside, and sent Creeper a text. "Are you awake?" Not even a minute later she got back, "Yes." "Can you talk?" In lieu of a response, Creeper called her. "Hi, I'm so glad you're awake," Myrian said nervously. "Is something wrong? You know you can tell me no matter what's on your mind." Despite her nervousness, Myrian laughed gleefully. "Thank you. I know I can always count on you. Myrian felt embarrassed. How could she word it in a way that wouldn't make her feel immature? "I accidentally overheard Citadel and my mom talking, and Citadel was planning to move up." "That's news to me. Steph hasn't said anything yet." "Well, based on what she said, that it was for me, so she wouldn't be a bad influence on me. And it's not my business at all, but I've been sitting here thinking back. They've been more wrapped up in each other than usual for the past half year or more. Remember after 2 weeks at the factory? Steph told you he needed to come back right away? I was thinking back over that, and I don't know. Am I just thinking too hard about it all, or... Myrian, you sound scared. I feel scared. Why? I think Steph may have tricked you, just so he could be with Citadel, and now she's going to be going away. Are you hyperventilating? Maybe. Why? Because your words are breaking up, and I don't want for you to stress about that either. First, I think you're right. I've noticed drastic changes in Seth's behavior in the past 8 months or so. He's become more confident, and there's a visible intimacy between the two that's unmistakable. So you think maybe they have? Possibly, but when Seth talked about problems at the factory, I was so inclined to believe him, as he'd never lied to me about anything. I don't know if he'd even know how to lie. I know it must be scary for you that Citadel is about to enter a whole new life stage. It has already, in a sense, but this is Citadel and Seth we're talking about. Do you trust my brother to treat her right? Yes, but what about respecting us? What about being understanding of the situation at the time? And Myrian had to stop. She was starting to realize, just hearing herself speak, why she was so upset. I don't believe Seth would lie to me, and I don't believe he did. I'm very sorry we had to go through all that time apart from each other, and I wish it hadn't had to be that way. It won't be from now on, I promise you that, Myrian. Another thing you can rest assured. Seth isn't out to hinder us or take Citadel out of your life. Do you believe that Citadel would abandon you? No. Myrian took a deep breath. Okay, Myrian? Kraber took a breath. He wanted to tell her that it was perfectly reasonable that Citadel would be worried about how the intimacy level of their relationship with Seth would influence Myrian, but it stung him too to think that Citadel would have such little trust in Myrian's purity. Although he also realized immediately the danger of risking that chance. It could cause Myrian intense unhappiness if she compared their relationship to Citadel and Seth's relationship. Yes? Please don't measure yourself up to anybody. You win me over in leaps and bounds just by being yourself. I love you." Myrian wondered to herself in awe. How did he know exactly what was on my mind? "You do too, my angel. I love you too." The Creeper heard her yawn. He almost laughed at how cute it was, but he didn't want her to hear him and feel embarrassed. "I'm going to let you sleep now, my darling wingling. Good night, my angel. Good night." Chapter 2. It was another week before Seth told Creeper that Cinderella was going to move out, which wasn't a surprise, but then the surprise came. "Wait a sec, why is she moving to our old town?" Creeper's throat tightened when Seth's eyes darted away. The lie Myrian had caught and stressed out over. On the phone? Was she right, being suspicious of his brother after all? "One reason is that we're getting married soon. It could be helpful working towards that. If I'm already there working at the factory, that can only be a positive thing. The other reason is that even for her to move out, if I'm here while she's visiting me, she might, I don't know." Creeper laughed, then quickly covered his mouth. Seth's face was crimson. "I'm sorry, Seth. If you two want privacy, you've got privacy. I'm not going to embarrass you or get in the way. I know how I'd feel if—" Creeper found himself unable to finish the sentence at his own flustered emotions. He couldn't fathom just how frightening it would be if he were with Myrian and they were caught. Although a second longer of thinking back, he recalled a nightmare in which that very thing had almost happened, as well as the time Paisley caught them about to kiss, including the time Seth caught him talking to Myrian on the phone. "I understand, Seth. Thank you. I already talked to Mom and Dad about it, and we're planning on leaving in September." "Wow, okay. I'm really, really happy for you both. I'm just shocked, too." Seth held his hands up. "You're not alone, see? My hands are shaking. I'm so excited, nervous, so many emotions." Creeper laughed. "I would react in the same way. I hope it all goes smoothly, Seth. You two deserve it. Thanks." After a few seconds, Creeper said, "Wow," again. That same evening, Citadel came to Myrian's room, finally broke the news. As she told Myrian she was moving out, Myrian saw Citadel's face turn a plum red, not like the color plum, but the color of the more reddish plum fruits. Not even knowing what it was that compelled her, Myrian found herself asking, "Is it frightening?" The colors in Citadel's face deepened instantly. She blinked, looking away, blinked, looked back before saying, "I don't want to talk to you about it. But I don't mean bad by that. I don't know how things will be for you in the future. I can say that it was nerve-wracking at first, but I'm not frightened with him. I don't want you to form any opinions on any based solely on mine, because I don't want you to have expectations which may potentially let you down either. I don't feel comfortable telling you, Myrian. Is that okay?" Myrian nodded, slightly embarrassed that she had even asked her cousin such a thing. "I don't want it to cause any chasms between us, okay?" Myrian nodded and hugged Citadel tightly. "I feel like I've come to know now a little of how it must feel keeping a secret, like you and Creeper have to, although not in the same way." She was happy Myrian looked up at her and laughed. "Creeper and I have never had to share a secret quite like yours, of course. But one of the most important things it has taught me is that though it would be great if we felt like we could trust more people to accept us, the smallest amount of acceptance goes a long way. We don't need the world to accept us, or anyone really, but ourselves. However, already having the acceptance of the people closest to us, we couldn't ask for more. We all accept you and Seth, Citadel." Citadel hugged her this time. "Then that's all I could ask for. I'm so proud of you, Myrian. I know you said once before that I'm an adult, and I know you probably sometimes envy that. That doesn't have to change how close we are. And me being married to Seth isn't going to change that either, I promise. I'm proud of you too, Citadel. I'm just going to miss you so much. I am already." "Me too. I promise I'll visit." I love you, Myrian. I love you, too. Congratulations. Citadel laughed. Thank you. Chapter 3. September arrived faster than anyone had expected. By the time Citadel was being driven to her new temporary apartment, she and Seth had already announced they'd be married in mid-December. On the way to the canvassing hometown, Myrian caught Citadel and Myrian exchanging glances every now and then. Creeper and Seth had driven with the rest of their car loaded with Citadel's necessities. Seth had slowly been moving his belongings back home, little by little. Myrian fell asleep on the way there, and was still drowsy when she got out of the car. When she saw Creeper there, it was everything she could do to hold herself back from greeting him as affectionately as her heart wished. But this time Samaria was there, so she had to give him a loving glance only. The canvassing parents flew out of the house to help Creeper and Seth carry Citadel's things into the house, explaining that they would move them into Citadel's apartment the next day. The greetings were brief, and before long they were sitting at the canvassing table. Creeper was across from Myrian, instead of beside. They fought the urge to stare at each other. Samaria was right beside Myrian, and Flora sat next to Creeper, noticing it, not daring to breathe a word about it. She made light conversation with Samaria, and then Flora and Walden took turns telling their story. Walden began. When I first saw Flora, I had to take a second glance. Her attention was enveloped in a broken piece of colored glass she must have found from the side of the road. It was a thin piece of glass she held. I was afraid she might cut her hand on it, for the reason that I've always been fascinated by glass. I stayed where I stood, staring. I hadn't even noticed I was staring until she looked up. Flora was chewing and swallowed, nodding before saying, I was so embarrassed. There I was, looking all around with the glass, when I saw someone standing there. I lowered the glass. He must have seen how ashamed I was, because he said, It's okay. I love all kinds of transparent objects. And I thought he was just being friendly until he'd said, I saw that you were looking through the edges of the glass. I thought I was the only one who did that. With that statement, I realized he was being sincere. When he asked how old I was, I smiled, telling him I was 14. Walden laughed, saying, I remember thinking, no way, she's older than me. Although 6 months difference isn't much, really. Myrian blushed, thinking, please don't reveal my relationship with Creeper. My mom has no idea. Flora picked up on Myrian's nervousness and went on. I was quite taken with his name, Canvastine. When he told me first, I thought it was so fancy. I thought her name, Flora, was adorable. It brought to mind a whole field of flowers. But neither of us actually said any of this. We stood there quietly, and I began to fear that if we said anything more, that we'd say nothing more to each other, the entire conversation would die. We'd part ways and never hear of each other again, until I saw her focusing once more on that piece of glass. I told her it reminded me of stained glass. Flora beamed and added, I told him it had reminded me of that, too, which was the reason I'd picked it up in the first place. As we talked, we found that we had many things in common, and that we could both stare at stained glass for hours. Now we can look at stained glass any time we want to. It brought us together. Who would have thought, this many years in the future, it would have led to such a profitable venture? And now we're so proud we can continue to pass this along to our son Seth. We regret every day that our intense focus on our work led to our sons feeling they needed to leave home, but look what they've made of their lives. Flora laughed cheerfully and motioned towards Seth and Citadel. It's so exciting seeing these two beginning to prosper together, and we're so excited to have Citadel join our family. Samaria was just as cheerful but wordless at first, wiping tears, and said, I couldn't wish for better for Citadel, and I'm happy our son has come into her life. I'm also glad to have met you. You can be very proud of your sons. Very proud." Flora grinned. "Thank you, and the same for Citronelle and Myrian." Smeria looked confused for a moment and exchanged glances with Citronelle, who smiled. "I told them, but I've always seen you as my adoptive mother." Smeria laughed, wiped her eyes again. "I've always seen you as my daughter." Myrian wanted to hug Craper, but once again there was too strong a chance that as Smeria parted ways with the Canvastine parents, telling them how nice it was to meet them and hugging Citronelle for a long time, she might accidentally see them hugging. And it was too risky. Instead, they gave each other meaningful glances, but Myrian still caught Citronelle give Smeria one last oddly serious one as they got into the car. "Myrian, there's something I need to tell you." Overlapped with Myrian's question. "Mom, I've always wondered something. Can I ask?" After a few seconds, Smeria said, "I don't think I heard you. You can go first." Myrian stared out the window as the car pulled out of the Canvastine driveway. "How did you know my father?" "I wish I could say." Myrian was already internally questioning, not for the first time, if her father was a sperm donor, but then her next question would have to be about the man in the grocery store. Smeria's next reply took Myrian out of these thoughts. "Well, I did know him, but without ever feeling like I got to really know him." Was it Myrian's imagination, or did her mother's face go red? "We met at a bus stop and went on a few dates. For a few months. We would go to fast food places or go walking. After a while he had invited me over to his house in the evenings. One night, when he didn't show up for a date, I went to his house thinking maybe we could meet there. He was just not ready yet." Smeria took a breath. A nice married couple answered the door. "He was married?" Smeria wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "His sister was married. He'd been kicked out of his own house and was living with her, but things weren't going well there either. He was trying to find a new home for himself. He was too ashamed to tell me himself. But he hadn't told them about me, either. So I felt ashamed and betrayed. I did the cowardly thing, and I just stopped trying. I was hurt." That man in the grocery store. Myrian felt like sobbing, surprised how her mother could keep it together, telling her, when if that had happened to her, she would almost never feel like she could tell the story out loud. "I'm so sorry, Mom." Smeria looked at her for a second. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she smiled. "Don't be. He'll always hold a place in my heart." "But we weren't meant to be." "You were undoubtedly meant to be." Hoping that it would make her mom feel better if she thought about something different, she asked her, "What was it you said you needed to tell me?" "Myrian, I've kept this from you for a while. I feel bad that I have. I didn't know how you'd react. Or Citronelle. And Citronelle is all for it. I asked her advice on telling you. I've been seeing someone." Despite Mary's apparent nerves, she laughed a little at the end of what she'd said. "Has Citronelle met him?" While Myrian asked this, she realized this must be how her mother could finally tell her about her father without crying hard. "No, I'm thinking you both would love him right away. I've told him a lot about you two." "When can we meet him?" "Well, he'll be my date to Citronelle and Seth's wedding. But if you'd like to meet him before then, I can invite him over one evening for supper." "Yes, I'd love to meet him." "You would? I'm so glad. Thought maybe you'd be upset since it isn't your dad, and I felt like for a long time maybe you'd always hoped that—" "Oh, no, don't worry about that. To know he wasn't honest about your relationship or honest with you about himself, I don't want that for you. Happy you finally met someone. I want you to be happy, Mom." Smeria laughed. "I'm so happy to hear that. I'll let him know. What's his name?" Myrian caught her mother turned red as she said, "His name is Alfred." Myrian couldn't wait to tell Craper about everything her mother had just told her as soon as she could, but her hopes sank when she saw a text from him that read, "I will stay in town just for tonight and tomorrow night to help Seth and Citronelle with moving. I won't be able to talk tonight. I love you. It's just for a few days. I'll be back as soon as I can. She sent a reply. I can't wait. Love you too. I miss you already. I have so much I want to tell you. While Craper was helping Seth and Cinderella, his mother casually asked, How old is Myrian now? 17. I take it you're planning to wait until she's 18 to tell her mother about your relationship with her daughter? But I've got a better suggestion. I'm listening. I get a sense from Samaria's personality that she'd be much more at ease if she arrives at the conclusion that you and Myrian would make a great couple herself. How am I going to accomplish that? Cooper didn't know whether to laugh or panic. Son, all you really have to do is just be yourselves, you and Myrian, around her. It wasn't hard for me to spot it. When I saw the two of you walking together around the factory, if you remember, the two of you have intense chemistry. You don't even have to try to make it clear you love each other. Even though Craper knew his mother was trying to put his mind at ease, he felt anxiety at the thought of being so open around Myrian's mother. Until he remembered months before at Myrian's graduation party, when he'd met an ex-friend of hers who'd told them, Look, it's not my place, but you really do you truly think nobody could tell just from seeing you two standing together? Cooper found himself smiling, thinking to himself, maybe it's worth a shot. Not holding back from being ourselves, just for her mother. Maybe it would lessen the shock it might cause when we decide to tell her. He nodded, looked up at his mother and said, Okay. Where I left off was actually the end of part 1. So, I can start part 2 now. Part 2, Chapter 4. Craper couldn't wait to come back and tell Myrian about the conversation he'd had with his mother, and Myrian couldn't wait to tell him about the conversations she'd had with her own mother. They both agreed that on the days when Samaria's new boyfriend would visit, they couldn't go walking because that alone would be too much of a shock. Instead, Myrian took the first chance she had whenever Samaria and Alfred went out to go to Craper's house or go walking with him. They both felt the best environment to act natural with each other would be in public at an event. They were certain of at least 3 upcoming events before Myrian's birthday. There was Craper's birthday, Seth and Cinderell's wedding, and Christmas. On Craper's birthday, Alfred and Samaria had gone on a date. Myrian got to Craper's house as soon as she could, thinking that Seth and Cinderella might be there and surprise their mother with a visit. Unfortunately, they weren't able to visit, so they called instead. When they talked it over with Seth and Cinderella, they found out they'd wanted to be married in mid-December as a pre-Christmas celebration. If they have no clue, we can fall in love before their eyes. Myrian laughed happily. Myrian hadn't been able to get Craper anything for his birthday, but Craper brought down apple cider. If anything, I should apologize to you because we aren't getting to rake leaves together this year. He pulled down 2 champagne flutes and filled them with apple cider. But you know what I'd love right now? I'd love to celebrate with you by drinking apple cider, and together we can sit reading your journal. While we've got time, we can revisit our memories and get ideas from them, from how we can transition out of any secrecy. Even if their wedding is our one shot before your birthday, we can take the opportunity. Myrian laughed. And we can make it into ice cream salad? Of course. How could I forget? Let's have some now. They clinked glasses, and Craper brought ice cream down from the freezer with ice cream cones. Happy birthday, my angel, Myrian said, crying happily, and she held his hand, thinking, We're almost there. Freedom to soar together. We'll soar forever, Creeper said, making Myrian blush. She hadn't realized she said it out loud, but there was nothing to hide. Chapter 5. On the way to the canvassing factory for the wedding, Alfred and Samaria took turns driving. When it was Alfred's turn, he tried to make comments on rules of the road and road signs in an attempt to help Myrian understand driving. Myrian was in her own world. The wedding was held inside the factory. The couple danced to a light show of the stained glass display, and then the lights came on and they said their vows. They had the floor cleared around the windows so that afterwards couples could dance with each other among the dimmed lights. The colors hit them like an elegant disco. Dalton danced with Paisley, Seth with Cinnamon, Samaria with Alfred, Cinnamon with her mother, Myrian with her mother, Myrian with Cinnamon, and then Creeper tapped her on the shoulder, and as their eyes met, they fell into the next second without a second thought, taking their chance. There was a lot of clapping to the beat, and Myrian's heart thundered in time. Enthralled by Creeper's bravery to lift her swiftly off her feet for them, and anyone to see. And in her mind they were flying. By nightfall they were at the canvassing house exchanging gifts, and Myrian knew that when they would leave, it would be like coming back down to earth, but it would only be for a short while, and the two kept their eyes glued to each other. Creeper opened a gift to him, knowing it was from Myrian, but as he marveled at the glitter snow globe of 2 snow hearts with red and white glitter cut in heart shapes that fell around it, he asked, "Is this to me or the newlyweds?" Myrian met his eyes and smiled unabashedly. "It's yours." Creeper's gifts to Myrian were in one bag with a dessert calendar. He pointed out that October had a recipe for apple cider, and he was sure she would love it, and a matching jeweled headband and necklace set. "Thank you, Creeper." Myrian beamed in the hopes that her mother would hear the "I love you" in her tone of voice, and the expression Creeper had on his face when he tipped his head forward. As it turned out, Alfred caught the expression on Creeper's face, and Samaria caught the implication of Myrian's gift to Creeper, but the two arrived at separate conclusions. On the ride home, Alfred said, "I bet you've been missing your cousin plenty, haven't you, Myrian?" "Yes, I have," Myrian responded, slightly uneasy about what he might be about to say. "How would you feel about moving a little closer to Cinnamon and Seth?" Myrian's jaw dropped, but not pleasantly, and as Samaria looked back, she caught the tears forming in Myrian's eyes. Myrian couldn't believe as she stepped out of the car that all it could take was one sentence to floor her and send her crashing down hard from the sky. She was sitting in her room, calming herself by turning the hourglass without a tea candle in the holder over when Samaria asked to enter her room. Myrian nodded with a smile. Samaria sat down and started. "Listen, Myrian, I've noticed you and Creeper have been getting close lately. And he's a great guy." Myrian's face lit up, but even as her heart pumped with excitement, they were really having this conversation. Something in her mother's tone of voice made her feel cautious. "Undoubtedly. He's a great person," she said with great enthusiasm when Samaria paused. Samaria nodded, looked down as she continued. "He has a heart of gold, really. But I think his heart may belong to someone else, and I don't want to see you get hurt, dear." And without a glance at Myrian, her mother left, ending the conversation there. And Myrian felt it wasn't the right time to correct her mother. Instead, she swallowed the tears that would have been senseless. After all, Myrian knew Creeper loved her and wouldn't break her heart. And she walked over to the mirror, placing the jeweled headband on her head, and as it sparkled, she saw its resemblance to a crown. As Alfred passed Myrian's door on the way out, he overheard Myrian's voice talking to Creeper on the phone. "It's beautiful, Creeper. I love it so much. Look, my mom caught on that I have feelings for you, but she doesn't believe that you love me. I know we can do what we can to show her, but the thing that scares me is that Alfred hinted at wanting to encourage my mom to move closer to Citadel and Seth. Alfred sped his steps to the front door, and even if he had stood there a moment longer, he wouldn't have heard Craper's response. I'll do everything in my power to prevent you from leaving, even if it means you come live with me. Maybe it's time I told Samaria how I feel about you. Samaria would have been in shock had she heard this, or Myrian's reply. Soon, my angel, we'll be free to do anything we want. Even if they insist on moving, I'll make my way back as soon as I get the chance. However, as Samaria hugged Alfred and was about to kiss him good-night, he told her, I'm so glad to have gone today to your niece's wedding. It truly was beautiful, and I'm honored that you're letting me into your life, Samaria. Your family is beautiful. I'm just concerned about those two. Seth and Citadel? Don't be. Not them, the other. Your daughter and that... Your daughter and that man. Those two? Don't be. I can see for myself Myrian's quite taken with him, but his hospitable manners towards my daughter couldn't be further from indecent. Alfred nodded, frowning gravely. He said, I see. Well, I'm still concerned. They kissed good-night. And even as Alfred got in his car, he was still concerned. Craper had just said goodnight to Myrian on the phone when his doorbell rang. He went to the door, and it was Alfred. Look, Craper, is it? Craper smiled. I am. It was nice of you to join us today at the wedding, Alfred. Do you want to come in? As Craper motioned for Alfred to come in, his guard was up, but he felt like the best way to talk it out would be to act in such a way to make Alfred think his guard was down. In opposition, he threw up his hands. I'm fine right here. This won't take long. My girlfriend is a great woman. Myrian smiled, momentarily confused. Sure. She is, Alfred said firmly, and seemed to be waiting for Craper to confirm this with a nod. He was, and Craper did. She is, Alfred made a point of repeating before he added. Her daughter is a great girl. Woman, Craper objected. Myrian is a great woman, too. Alfred's eyebrows jumped. Craper looked at Alfred askance before asking. I hear you're trying to convince her mother that they should move away. Alfred's eyebrows rose higher yet, and Craper almost died laughing. He had to compose himself. That's right. It would be good for the girl to be closer to her beloved cousin. Would it? Is that what your girlfriend wants to happen? I only want the best for Samaria and her daughter. She isn't your daughter. Alfred's eyes dropped low on his face. I'm well aware of that. Are you aware of the date of Myrian's upcoming birthday? When this was met with silence, Craper continued. You can continue to try to control everything based on what you think you know of the situation, but you would be powerless to control what Myrian decides for herself, for her own future. You want the best for Samaria, and I want the best for her daughter. Craper held out his hand, non-verbally asking for peace, but Alfred looked down and shrugged, backing away. I'm not the girl's father, but she needs someone looking out for her, if her mother isn't suspicious of you. Well then, when you see us, take a good long look. I would never harm her. Alfred walked back to his car without saying another word. Chapter 6. Craper told Myrian about the conversation he'd had with Alfred the next day, certain that none of what Alfred said was an actual threat, but his tone and the line, I'm not the girl's father, but she needs someone looking out for her, if her mother isn't suspicious of you, kept returning to his thoughts. I'm worried and I want to tell my mom, but I'm not sure what that would do. The timing seems wrong. In the weeks that followed, Alfred continued to bring up the idea of trying to persuade Samaria to move, but when Myrian looked over at her mother, Samaria showed no sign either way of what her thoughts were on the subject. When Myrian mentioned it on the phone to Craper, he could hear Myrian grow anxious, and he said, "Well, she has the final say, and all of that. Maybe she would be more vocal about it if she liked the idea, but she's not, because to voice her opinion might risk the relationship. Or maybe she doesn't take his hints seriously. It's her house, not his. They're not even married yet, or even engaged. It's all really up to her if she wants to move." Myrian had been relieved, and reminded herself of what Craper had said until Alfred came over one night and said, "February would be a great time to visit Saffron Citadel, and maybe we could start looking at the surrounding neighborhoods. What would you think of that?" Myrian started choking on her water, and she didn't intentionally, but she couldn't stay in the room to find out what Samaria was going to say anymore. So she pushed in her chair and excused herself. As soon as she was in her room, she called Craper and told him, "But look, if they do, Craper, I'll be 18 by the time they'd be moving their things in, right? I don't have to go with them." There was a silence, and Myrian couldn't hear Craper wipe tears from his face. "Myrian, I can't stand back anymore. It sounds like this has gotten way out of hand. If he's serious, and she takes him seriously, I'm not going to wait anymore to see what happens. She hasn't even spoken to you about what you want, knowing that you're almost an adult. You deserve a say in this. He's appealing to her sadness at missing Citadel, when truly I don't see what he stands to gain from this, apart from his self-righteous belief that he's got to step in and thwart any chance of us proving that we're meant to be together. Myrian, we've been good, and we've been patient, but he's testing and trying my patience. Yes, I know. What can we do? At this point, Myrian, a little standing up for ourselves won't doom our chances. Tell me if Samaria talks to you and comes to a decision, or if you get a chance to talk to her in the next few days. I know it feels like our time is running out, but it's an illusion, because our time begins soon." As the days passed, Myrian felt an increasing tension, and she wasn't sure if it was between herself and her mother, or if it was only herself. Samaria had never come to her room to check on her when Myrian excused herself, but it couldn't have been more clear how she felt about moving out, right? Mentally, Myrian kept repeating, "Mom, I want to stay here. This is my home." Every night until she fell asleep, but her mouth went dry when she saw Samaria again the next day. Creeper did all he could to encourage her, but every time Myrian was about to say it, she bit her tongue. And then came the announcement. "We're going to Alfred's parents' house at 6. This is New Year's Eve." Myrian's mouth was more dry than ever, until she called Craper and told him her heart felt shattered when Craper said, "I need to go." And then she thought, maybe he's trying to help push me to confront this and speak to her on my own. The minutes passed and she forced herself to leave her room. She was calling out for her mother when she heard the doorbell ring. Myrian almost collapsed, thinking for certain it had to be Alfred, but then she heard an unmistakable voice saying, "Hello, Samaria? It's a new year tomorrow. And it's about time I told you something highly important." Myrian felt like Craper's voice was restoring her, and she was drawn towards the door to hear him. "Do you want to come in and sit down? This won't take long." "All right, well, let me know. Through the years, I've seen you strive for the absolute best for Myrian and Citadel. I hear you were uncertain for a while about even bringing this man Alfred home to introduce to them. Though you may not realize it yet, tomorrow and every second with him, you are changing your future, but in so doing, you're changing the future for Myrian. Whoa, Craper, I can see that you have a special bond with my daughter by now, maybe fatherly or even brotherly, but don't tell me you're jealous of Alfred. I've waited so long to find someone so special to me, and you're going to say something negative toward him now? I'm not going to hear it." Myrian's mouth dropped. She had crept up far enough to see Creeper at the door, talking to her mother. How could she be so off the mark? Myrian wondered, unable to stop staring at Creeper dressed in an exquisite suit. Rest assured I'm not jealous of your beau. He came to my doorstep weeks ago in a menacing tone, made it clear his intentions to move Myrian to keep her from me. Oh, believe me, I know of his suspicions. It's the way he gets. He had a daughter he fears he didn't look out for enough, and he blames himself that she's not on speaking terms with him. He has this drastic idea he can prevent that this time around. Would you listen to yourself right now? You're not married to him, or even engaged. What gives him the right to make that choice? Who says I disagree with his choice? Creeper blinked. He couldn't have been more confused. First, Samaria was dismissive of the idea that there was anything to be concerned about when it came to him and Myrian, but then she was all for moving Myrian away. Maybe you aren't aware of this, but you see, Alfred's concerns are not without reason. You may be blind to it, but my daughter is quite smitten with you. I love Myrian. Creeper said this softly, and Myrian almost thought he'd said, Leave me alone. Myrian mentally finished the sentence, but it made no sense until Creeper repeated louder. I love Myrian. I love Myrian. Myrian couldn't see Samaria's face, but she was almost relieved she couldn't see her mother's reaction. Ma'am, tomorrow is a brand new day, and many things are about to change. Not only will the new year begin, but the new season to come will bring new independence for Myrian. It will be the first season of her adult life. But I feel like right now she deserves to make her own choice about her future. She deserves to choose the way she wants to start off her new year of adulthood. When she voices her opinion about what she wants, she deserves for her opinion to be taken into consideration. It's time, Myrian, for her to let you speak. Myrian's face was on fire, seeing Creeper call out to her that way, motioning for her to join him beside her at the door. The implications came into place automatically. She made her way to his side with peace, feeling like nothing could tear them apart now. She turned to face her mother. Mom, I'm happy you found Alfred. He's good for you, but for me, there isn't good for any of us in the long run. His objections to Creeper are hurtful, and he doesn't live here yet. But I don't feel right here anymore. I'd rather be somewhere I know I don't have anything to doubt. If you really want to move to be closer to Sentinel, then I want that for you, Mom. Creeper had his hand on Myrian's back the entire time she spoke, and rubbed her back affectionately. Myrian looked up at him, and there was a huge question in his eyes that Myrian understood at once. She looked at her mother. Seth's room is unoccupied, but there's a bed, and Creeper has his own room. She trailed off when Samaria looked like she was going to tune out those details. I could stay with him and be in Seth's old room. I just can't live here anymore. I can't. I belong with Creeper. Creeper spoke when Samaria was silent. I will be patient for her. I promise I won't harm her, and I promise I will be there for her, and I will treat her right. He is good to me. Samaria, even if you say no now, I will be here patiently waiting for the day Myrian gets to her say in the matter. Samaria sighed and turned to her daughter. You are almost an adult. I see a lot of myself in you, and I don't want to say go do what you want in this case, but it's ultimately your choice. I can't stop you, Myrian. I don't really know what to think. You can always come back home. Even if Alfred and I move away, you are always welcome to come back home, Myrian. I love you. I can't stand here and watch you leave. Myrian briefly hugged Myrian and walked away. Myrian walked quickly to her room, gathering her hairbrush, her toothbrush, her hourglass. a headband and necklace set, her makeup, and arranged it all carefully in a shower bag. In her book bag, she packed her favorite outfits in her purse with her phone. When Creeper saw her holding both, he reached and picked up the heavier bag. Samaria wasn't there when Myrian turned around, but she called out, "Love you, Mom. Goodbye." Through tears that evening, Samaria packed more of Myrian's belongings and then closed Myrian's door to hide them when Alfred would come to bring her to his parents' house. On the ride there, he asked where Myrian was. "She didn't want to be here today, and it's time I tell you something important. I've been giving much thought to moving closer to Citadel, and while I would love to do that, Citadel is a newlywed. She needs breathing room. Myrian is fully grown. It's time I give her breathing room." Myrian felt confident in saying this, even though Myrian was not yet 18. Myrian was more mature than she had been at her age. Alfred recalled the way Creeper had asked him if he knew when Myrian's birthday was. Alfred silently took in this information, but Samaria continued, "You mean well, Alfred. I know you do. I pushed my own sister away by not giving her breathing room, and she was an adult, and already married. I'm not making that mistake again. I want Citadel and Myrian to talk to me. Because they want to, not because they have no choice. But you are not their father. It isn't your choice to make. You need to let me be their mother. If I ever find that you've pried into their lives, or have gone against my wishes, then I'll need room to breathe away from you as well. Even though I love you, I would have to let you go. Do you understand?" Alfred nodded silently. As Myrian walked to Seth's room, which was vacant except for leftover furniture, and the bed, she sighed and sat down. She was so happy she could burst into laughter at any second, but at the same time it saddened her in a way that it had to come to this. Yet it was by all means an absolute dream come true. Creeper followed her to the doorway. He saw her sitting there, and then his eyes widened. "I forgot, he took those sheets with him. Come on, we can get you new ones." "While we're there are a few other things I think we could pick up." Creeper reached out his hand, and Myrian took it. They held hands walking out the door and up to the car. "You look so nice, Creeper," Myrian said as soon as they got into the car. "So do you. Did you dress that way, knowing where the conversation would lead?" Creeper smiled. "Yes and no. I knew I would confess my love for you to her, and I wanted to look my best when I would tell her, but then she took my appearance the wrong way, paired with my words." Creeper started laughing, but he covered his mouth. "Good thing your mom doesn't share the same taste in men." Myrian laughed too, turning red. "I noticed that too. I might have almost been jealous considering her implication, but I was too shocked by it to even react." They went first to a store at the nearest mall, with a section that included a large array of comforter and sheet sets. After a few minutes of walking along, noticing that Myrian wasn't looking very hard at any of them, Creeper said softly to her, "You have nothing to be shy about. You need this, and you can pick anything you want. I won't judge you for anything." But Myrian blushed, but her heart raced, with her imagination running wild every time she looked at a blanket combination. "For sleep. This will be for sleep," she reminded herself while feeling her eyes close once more. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes, changing focus. Then she saw it. The colors of fall leaves. She said this softly as she grabbed the package, her mind immersed in the memory of a year before on Creeper's birthday, when they jumped in the leaves, and he tickled her, touching her abdomen by accident. She didn't know if Creeper would recall that just by looking at the set, but he smiled. When she looked up at him, he murmured, "That's funny, I would have chosen the same one." And momentarily, Myrian caught his expression, hint of a reverie in it of his own. Or was it just Myrian's imagination again? It wasn't her imagination that he brought it up to the register. As they got back in the car, Creeper said, I have a surprise for you. You've already done so much for me. You'll love this, I know you will. They drove to the back lot of the grocery store where they had planted flowers over a year before. Myrian was so happy she was in shock at first. Creeper popped his trunk and rolled out a towel. Myrian got out. As he handed her a champagne flute, he pointed to the bottle he held. This is sparkling apple juice. It's fine, I promise. Myrian laughed and sat down on the towel. I think I can see some of the flowers from last year, but it's so hard to tell just by the streetlights. In the little amount of light they could see each other with, they stared into each other's eyes, sitting beside each other and sipping their apple juice in no hurry. This is so perfect, Creeper, Myrian finally said, setting her glass down and getting closer to him. Creeper put his arm around her and kissed her head. And to think, today was going so horribly. It was, until you. Things needed to change. I couldn't go on seeing all that uncertainty and fear continue. And you know, maybe that man is good for your mother, but his ideas weren't good for you. I hope Myrian will see that eventually. Maybe so. And I thought, this is the new year. Myrian held on to Creeper, nodding. Like I said, perfect. So perfect. Creeper whispered into her hair. I couldn't agree more. They held on to each other silently in the dark, glancing at each other until they almost fell asleep, and then they began to hear the crashing sounds. Myrian, look, fireworks! Myrian laughed and smiled at him, mesmerized by the way the colorful lights reflected on his hair. Myrian made eye contact with her and moved the hair away from her face. It's the new year, Creeper whispered, awestruck by the way Myrian gazed at him in awe. You know what that means, Myrian said softly and kissed him. They kissed, caressed, and held on to each other long after the last rays of light lit up the night. When they returned to Creeper's house, they found a box waiting on the front porch. An envelope sat on top. They both agreed they were too sleepy to open it right away, so they moved it into the house, and Creeper helped Myrian put the sheets on Seth's old mattress and kissed her before saying, Good night, my sweet weakling. I can't wait for tomorrow. Neither can I. Good night, my angel. I'll see you tomorrow. Myrian left. Creeper was almost out of the room when he spotted the hourglass in the shower bag. He lifted it out and turned it over, sitting it on an empty shelf. He smiled at her and walked out. Myrian was asleep before the sand had poured down to the bottom of it. The next morning, Creeper left Myrian a note telling her where he kept pots and pans if she wanted to cook anything, and that he'd deliver pizza there later for them to eat together. Myrian unpacked her things and then unpacked the things her mother had brought her. More clothes and things in her room that she'd ran out of room for in her backpack. She was surprised she had forgotten to put the calendar Creeper had given her in her shower bag. Oh, that's right. After spending a while organizing her belongings, she read Smaria's letter. As much as Myrian felt like privacy had been stripped away, she couldn't help but feel free. That evening, while they ate pizza, Myrian told Creeper about the letter. I put all the important dates on my calendar, and she flipped through it and saw. She says in her letter that she's heartbroken that I didn't tell her. She also says she hasn't told anyone else, and she thinks it may be best not to. While Myrian watched Creeper read the letter himself, he asked, What do you think about it? Should she talk to Citadel or Seth? It seems like she doesn't know they know. Maybe we should give it time. Her uncertainty is natural given the situation, and we've already said what we needed to do and vocalize our feelings about it. Now might be a good time to let all the information sink in a little bit and let her determine for herself what her opinions are on the matter. The next day she sent another box with another letter, and Craper's poem was included, which Samaria had read. The day after that came another box with a letter included commenting on Myrian's sketches of the Kempstein's Bass factory. The sketches were included inside the box. While her mother's words of affirmation brought Myrian some peace of mind, Samaria closed the letter telling her she'd decided to consult Citadel about it the next day. Should we call Citadel and Seth to forewarn them about this? I think that might be best. I can call them right now and my mom. But would it be okay if I called them in my room? I don't think I would argue with Seth, but if he does get angry with me... Myrian remembered months before when Seth argued with Craper right in front of her, out of concern for them, but it was nevertheless intense. I understand completely. Craper spent the next 3 hours or so pacing around in his room. His conversation with Seth, then Citadel, then Flora. Myrian paced outside of Craper's door until Craper emerged, and she sighed when Craper smiled confidently at her. They're planning to tell Samaria their points of views on our relationship, how they came to learn that we were in relationship, and why they feel we belong together. Suddenly Craper laughed. I guess it's sort of like they'll be our lawyers tomorrow. Well, it's as if they're making a case for us. Indeed. Craper picked her up and spun her. You know, in the end, we're going to win, don't you? Myrian laughed, kissing him, when Craper set her down. Yes, I know. The next few days, more boxes came to Craper's house filled with more of Myrian's things, but no envelopes. After a week without more boxes, Myrian was sure that there wasn't anything she was missing. But the lack of correspondence frightened her. She called her mother into late January, and Craper did what he could to encourage her. Samaria finally called back during the second week of February. Myrian was so relieved to hear from her mother the first few sentences rushed by, without her gaining full comprehension of them at first. The first line that was really clear to her was, I accept that it's your decision. It's just a lot to take in. I still don't know what I feel about it. I accept that, Mom. I would be lying if I said I'm not worried. Even though everyone has said what they could to try and convince me it will be all right. I love you. I love you too, Mom. I hope one day you will come to approve, but I have to respect your opinion. I respect you, Myrian, and your choices are yours. I'm not going to fight for you to be where you don't want to be. I want to see you thrive, and I want to see you happy. I'm very happy with Craper, Mom. Did she hear her mother laugh? She did. I believe you, it's just difficult to fathom. You're always welcome to visit, even if it's not home to you now. You can always call me, anytime, Myrian. I am sorry that I wasn't ready to speak for you for a while. I didn't know what to think, or what to say. It's okay, I thought that might have been why. How are things with you and Alfred? Very well. I don't want you to worry about him. He doesn't know you're an adult. He doesn't know you aren't an adult. I put my foot down about space. I don't want to move just yet to get closer to Seth and Citadel. Maybe in the future, but this is my home. I understand, Mom. There was an awkward pause before Samaria said, I wish I could be more understanding of your situation. Maybe it will come with time. I don't know. It's okay if you don't understand. Just know that I'm very well here. I'm very happy, okay? If anything goes wrong, I don't see how it could, but if anything goes wrong, you'll be the first to know. I love you. I need to go now, Mom. I'm so glad you called. Love you too, Myrian. Call me anytime. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Bye. That night as Myrian and Craper ate together, Myrian told him about the conversation she finally had with her mother, and she said, Even if my mom never agrees, I can live knowing I did what I could, along with everyone, to help her understand. Even if we don't ever win her approval, we won't lose each other. like a prize I didn't enter the contest for. You're the perfect win for me. To this day, Creeper, I can't believe my luck. Creeper grabbed her hand and squeezed it. He was still eating his food and couldn't kiss her yet. When he took a swallow of water, he told her, I can't believe my luck either. We've lived together 1 month and a half already, and that's all we have left until your birthday. We really have no reason to worry ever again about the approval of others. Chapter 8. On Myrian's birthday, she went to Smaria's house for breakfast. Alfred wasn't there because they'd all agreed it was better if he didn't know the date of Myrian's birthday. Myrian gave her a sketching set. Stephenson and Elle were unable to make it there the day of her birthday, but their gift to her would be treating Myrian and Creeper to a beach trip the upcoming weekend. Creeper gave Myrian a brand new journal when she came home, and inside it he had written, For the new life ahead of us. And there was a bookmark with a string, and attached to that string was an engagement ring. Myrian hugged him tight, clinging to him, but then she felt the tears pouring too fast to hide, and she ran to the bathroom. Creeper was confused and worried until he heard Myrian blow her nose, and he stifled laughter, not wanting to hurt her feelings. She was quiet again for a few minutes, and Creeper got concerned again, but then she opened the door. I was crying, and I didn't want you to see me like that right after. She took a breath and let it out with a squeal. I'm just so happy. Absolutely, my angel. I applied makeup. I also texted my mom. I wanted to break the news to her as soon as possible because she knows what today means for me. She trailed off, feeling the heat in her face. Creeper understood her shyness and smiled. I understand that completely, my love. You can tell anyone. I want to tell the world. I feel so proud to call you my own. The way his words washed over her, Myrian swooned slightly, closing her eyes. I am too, my angel. Creeper held Myrian's face in one hand and gave her light kisses all over her face. When Myrian slid her hands beneath his shirt, he was so surprised and overwhelmed, he stopped right before he was about to kiss Myrian's lips, and inhaled sharply. Creeper's reaction surprised Myrian, and she dropped her arms back by her side. As Creeper's eyes opened, the longing in his eyes perfectly reflected the desire within her. But Myrian wondered, could he tell? Almost as quickly, Myrian's nerves kicked in, and Creeper saw her eyes widen. He stepped back, but kissed her cheek. He pushed his hair back. His smile was nervous when he told her, I'll be right back. Okay? Myrian waited in his room for 5 minutes, while she heard the blow-dryer in the bathroom. When he came out and saw her sitting on his bed, he hesitated before walking toward her. You look so great, Creeper. Creeper smiled nervously, as he had moments before. So do you. As Creeper went to sit down, Myrian asked, Tonight is special, and I wanted to know if I could sleep next to you tonight. We don't have to rush or do anything you don't feel ready for yet, of course. Creeper laughed incredulously and apologized. I don't mean to laugh, it's just... Yes, of course you can sleep beside me. I could have said the same to you. I'm just so blown away by everything. You're my fiancé now, too. It's beyond my wildest dreams, and you're here. I don't want you to feel any pressure to rush into all of the freedom allotted us now, all at once. We can take it at our own pace. I don't want you to ever think you would disappoint me. Always speak your mind with me, okay? Myrian nodded as Creeper sat down, and the scent of his shampoo mixed with his cologne washed over her. You smell amazing. You washed your hair? Creeper nodded. I wanted to look my best for you. He trailed off, with Myrian staring up at him dreamily. My angel, you always look the best. Creeper leaned forward and kissed her. Creeper kept his lamp on, and when they were beside each other, they became so enchanted by the vision of each other laying down, about to fall asleep in the same bed for the first time, they forgot to turn it off. They got closer and held each other, caressing and discovering each other little by little. They became so absorbed in fascination. It wasn't long before sleep was out. Together they soared into a dreamlike reality as they entered an endless paradise. Peace flooded them so thoroughly they drifted off, forgetting to say good night, though by then night was long gone. That's the okay. That was the end of the third book.